So let's start with basic bad interviewing. Basic bad interviewing is thinking or behaving as if you were at a police station and under interrogation. I also call that ping-pong style interviews, where you are asked a question, you give the answer, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. Well, you know. So this is basic bad interviewing. Basic good interviewing starts with the first question, and there is a predictable beginning. All the interviews start the same way, and it is either why have you applied, why have you contacted me, what is your current situation, or please introduce yourself. And this question is always answered the same way. The only thing that changes is the first sentence and the last sentence of your reply. So what do? You introduce yourself. Well, I have applied because, or I have contacted you because I have 15 years of experience as in HR, blah, 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 and the slide we just saw before. Please introduce yourself. I have more than 15 years of experience, blah, blah, blah. What is your current situation? I have more than 15 years of experience, and you have your auto presentation. Where does that come from? From your CV. This is the unique selling proposition. This is your profile summary. So going back to module 1 and the first step is super important, because the better you prepare your CV, the better will be your auto presentation at the beginning of an interview. And your auto presentation will set the tone for the rest of the interview. Practice it so it sounds smooth and natural and authentic, and it's really you. And don't ask, well, shall I introduce myself professionally or personally? You are at a professional context interview, so it's only professional. And please do not start with, oh, I'm currently looking for a job. We know that. That's why you're probably applied actively. Okay, here an example of the different levels of interviewing. Example, finance director, recruited to candidate. Why should we hire you? Here the first answer, because you can rely on me. I'm a good manager and a loyal employee. This would be basic bad interviewing, and this is, I'll show you an example later. Candidates, because I have more than 10 years of experience in finance, I am a good manager. I have experience in working in international corporations. This would be better interviewing. Answer number 3, because in the last 3 years, I was a co-author of 2 restructuring projects, which I have also delivered. On every position I have held in the last 7 years, I was able to identify savings of €500,000. I have also managed to reduce unwanted turnover in my unit from 23 to 0% in 6 months since assuming the position. And this is strategic interviewing. Now, of course, we'll do that in a bit. So other standard predictable questions are, what can you tell me about yourself? What is your current situation? Why did you send me your CV? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Of all your previous jobs, which did you enjoy the most and why? And then, how do you manage conflicts? Describe an event that demonstrates your initiative, proactivity, something. What style of management gets the best from you? What kind of manager, salesperson, receptionist, finance guy, programmer, etc. are you? What have been your major achievements to date, etc.? You know that these questions might come, so why not prepare for them? Why are you a good candidate? Why should we hire you? Now, we will discuss during the Q&A the most difficult questions for you. So you now have an hour to formulate, not now, but you can prepare the 2 most difficult interview questions for you. I'll choose the ones that repeat themselves most often or are particularly tricky or non-obvious and generate the most mistakes. And we'll do that during the Q&A. And if it's something specific, make sure you give context. So for example, if you are Could you tell me why you didn't work for half a year 2 years ago? And if that was your question, for example, to discuss your Q&A, I need to know what happened in that half year, so I can actually comment on that properly. So during the Q&A session, think about in the next hour, what are the two most difficult interview questions that you want me to discuss during the Q&A time? Good. Then another very standard question is how much, meaning what are your salary expectations? How much are you currently making? We would need a whole other webinar to talk about salary negotiations and answering that question. I have prepared a very detailed blog post summarizing over 30 articles on salary negotiations, plus our own know-how and tips and tricks and everything. Marcelina will send a link to that blog post after today's webinar, so you can read it and apply it. Okay, so overall, when you are in an interview situation, assume that the person has not read your CV or they don't remember it. Very often the person, when deciding that they want to interview you, they glance at your CV, usually at the first page or first half page, and say, I want to talk to that person. And then the interview happens 1 or 2 weeks later, and in between they've seen another 100 CVs. So they might not remember, or before the interview, they might have only 5 minutes to actually read your CV, or they will read your CV while talking to you. So when answering interview questions, assume that the person is not familiar with your CV. Assume that there will be no additional follow-up or detailing questions. So anything that is important for the interviewer to know from your perspective, you need to say it. You need to be very explicit in that. Don't expect follow-up questions. Or if you don't tell them, they won't know. Give full answers in accordance with STAR. What does STAR stand for? Situation, come on, task, action, and results. To give you here is an obvious STAR example. Question from the interviewer: how did you manage to finish project XYZ on time and budget? Well, I made sure I had all the resources and communicated with the team accordingly. This is a standard answer, but now let's improve that. How did you manage to finish this project on time and budget? At the time, I had been a project manager for only 3 months, and I took over the project that was already 4 months delayed, and the client was not happy about it, to say the least. I was tasked to make sure the project was delivered, ideally making up for lost time. The budget wasn't even a priority. I then proceeded to swiftly interview everyone involved to understand the situation and then identify the problem, and so on. So they audited the resources at hand, communicate closely with the client. At the end, not only did we make up for lost time, I also found a cheap IT solution that helped us stay within budget. The client was so impressed by how I turned around the project that we got another assignment from them. So what did the person do? Instead of going into ping-pong style and say, well, I communicated and that's how I handled the project, you give context: situation, challenge, problem, context. Then you describe the task, then the actions you took, and important, then you share the results. The most common mistakes when using the STAR format is candidates don't take enough time to embed the task, action, result in the appropriate context. And this is especially important when context brings out the importance of skills or results. It is a difference if you've just taken over a project that was already delayed and you saved it versus business as usual. Candidates focus only on task and actions, not mentioning the results, or they only mention the results without explaining how they and their teams got there. Here is, I do see the question from Facebook, in 5 years, why are you looking? Why are you looking? No. Okay. I see those questions. I'll respond to them during Q&A. So a non-obvious situation, how to use STAR, is, for example, here, why did you change from company A to company B? An answer could be, well, ping-pong style, I got a call from a headhunter. This is a true story. So this was one of my clients. And here also for you some background information, company and company B. So company B was located in a different country where the candidate had no previous experience in. So the change from A to B was something special. So there is some context missing. Okay, a headhunter called you, but it's very non-standard for a headhunter to source that particular profile in a completely different country. So the actual answer from that candidate that we worked out, well, one thing you need to know is that country B has long been a favorite travel destination of mine. I've been going fishing there for more than 10 years, every summer, and I had taken my family there. Now imagine summer 2003, I'm sitting in the boat on this beautiful lake in B with my fishing buddy, and all of the sudden the phone rings. An executive search consultant I had known for years called to ask if I was interested in moving to B for a job he had seen on their internal job board for clients. And of course I said yes. I went through the entire interviewing process, and because I had been with company A at that position for already 5 years and I had just delivered that, it made sense. Plus, although I was based in B, I was still responsible for my previous region. And this is the alternative answer to a headhunter called me. Another example of how to use STAR in non-obvious situations. For example, how do you deal with conflict? I actively readjust my attitude during a conflict situation. This means that I strive to listen to the other person's point of view without becoming defensive. I also attempt to move the confrontation to a private space to avoid further complications. That could be an answer. Hold on, okay. But what I want to get there is to then say, let me give you an example. And that example is then in the STAR format. I know that you are posting already your questions that are difficult for you. We will have a couple of interactions in the meantime, so please post those questions in the Q&A. I will answer all of them. Okay, good. Here are some tips, especially when using STAR in non-obvious situations. Don't blabber, especially online. Blabbering is not storytelling. So some just start talking and talking, not realizing, not reading the room, not reading the interviewer. And one question was asked, and 20 minutes later, we still haven't heard the answer. Sneak in important aspects of your professional experience and competencies. As you saw in the previous example with a headhunter called me, that person did mention, and because I had been with the company for 5 years and I had just delivered this and that, that's why. So you can sneak in those bits into the conversation. Prepare concrete examples for all generic HR questions. And here, an extension of how offline is not really online. So what happens there? Why isn't it fully the same? When candidates sit in their own comfort zone, candidates often get too comfy. They don't control their own body language. I don't want to even tell you how often I've had candidates or potential clients sitting in front of the screen, moving around, fidgeting. The other day I talked to a CEO who actually put their foot on the desk and then embraced his knee. Some lie on the couch completely subconsciously. They pay less attention to the interviewer's body language. And yes, you have already picked up on that. The body languages are much more subtle. It is, do they take notes? Are they interested? Because you just see this here. So it requires much more concentration. They listen less attentively. Hence, what recruiters have observed in the last 2-3 months, candidates talk more, but not necessarily to the point. Moving on to strategic interviewing. So, when we look at strategic interviewing, before you go into any interview situation, ask yourself, what is the goal of this interview? I did ask you that before. Presenting yourself broadly is the goal when you talk to a headhunter for the first time who says that they don't have currently any recruitment processes. The goal of the interview could be to get into the next round. So from headhunter to HR to the top, meaning to the business side, to the decision maker. The goal of the interview could be to demonstrate your added value to get hired. So this is when you talk to the business side. So it is tricky because you need to remember the goal of the interview, which every time will be different in the context of the company you're interviewing for, the industry that you're at, the market situation, the interviewer itself. So being a candidate, I want to say being a candidate, I can't say that, it's being recorded. Being a candidate is something very challenging, if I using politically correct words. Because not only do you have to present yourself, you need to think about what is the goal of the interview in context of the company, the industry, the market situation, the interviewer. So it is very difficult. And you also need to remember, how did I get this interview? Is it through a headhunter? Did I get it directly? Was I recommended? Is there a networking? Is it a job ad? Because then your answers can be slightly different. So before an interview, my recommendation is to ask yourself, what are the 5 most important things the interviewer should know about me within the first 20 minutes? Sometimes the interview will not last longer than 20 minutes, and you make a list. I said 5 most important things. Usually it's 3 to 5 most important things. And 20 minutes, because very often, especially if it's a get to know interviews, a mixture between a screening call and an actual interview, if they don't hear something relevant within the first 20 minutes, they will not extend the interview. So here an example would be, let me just pull out all 5. So let's say that for that particular candidate, what they want to make sure that is communicated within the first 2 minutes is experience in digitalization, complex projects, multicultural teams, MBA with digital, and they speak 3 languages. So how does that then work? How do you use that in practice? Let's assume that we're now in the middle of the interview. It's a 5th question, and the interviewer asks you, so why did you move from company A to B? So you would give the star answer and mention something that is important from the 5 points. So instead of only focusing on being technically correct in giving the answer, I also want to strategically add more points. So here I'd say I would give a star answer, and then I would get the opportunity to do a full digitalization project, not only for one department, but the entire organization. for example. What are your strengths? And then, depending on what has not been mentioned before, that's, I already mentioned just now, digitalization. So the person goes back mentally and says, okay, have I mentioned that I speak 3 languages fluently? No. So my strength, one of my strengths is that I speak 3 languages fluently. Thanks to that, I'm a better manager for my multicultural team, where I've been able to keep the attrition rate under 3%. And my second strength is this, and my third strength is that. So you answer those questions strategically. So that was actually, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Here, the answer will be different depending on how the first part of the interview has been going so far. If the sixth question wasn't what are your strengths, but what would your current boss say about you? Then you say, well, my current boss would highlight that I speak 3 languages fluently, and that's why I'm a better multicultural manager, etc., etc. So you can sneak in different points strategically from the 3 to 5 top list of things that you want to communicate. So whatever hasn't been mentioned yet. Now, I mentioned something at the beginning, the talk to the skeptic before he speaks to you. How does that work, and what is that? That means that you as a candidate proactively address obvious weaknesses or missing competencies up front. And here a couple of examples in a bit. It shows awareness and it shows maturity. So again, these are real examples. I had a client who was an ultra competent CFO who looked like 21. So what we figured out here, when introducing herself, she said, nice meeting you. And yes, I'm actually a CFO, although I look like a first-year student. I have been in my role for the last 7 years, and I managed $2 billion in equity. With a statement like this, with addressing something up front, the interviewer will not be sitting in a conference room or in front of the screen, double checking the photo or the CV and the candidate, trying to figure out, am I actually talking to the right person? So you want the attention of the interviewer on the things that matter and not the things that might be distracting. So what one of the other strategies with that particular client wasn't only the verbal introduction. We also redid how she introduced herself more formally, not a shortened nickname version. Plus, she dressed and used a different makeup to at least not look like 21, but 26. This is a recent case, competent managers with rusty English. What did we do here? Yes, thank you for inviting me to the interview. I have to say I am a bit nervous. I used to work in English for every day for 10 years. And now, even after this short break, preparing for this interview, I realized how rusty my English has become. Now, important, he mentions, I immediately signed up for conversation classes, meaning I'm already working on that week on what you might think could be a weakness. Because otherwise, if I don't address that upfront, the interviewer will be sitting, and after 5 minutes will say, no, but this English is not good. I'll move on with candidates with a better English. But if I already know, the candidate used to work in English fluently, is now rusty, and is already working on it, it's a non-issue for me anymore. Another example, here, case requirement of having worked in an international law firm or international consulting firm or international agency. As I said, what I want to do here is understand why, if you don't have it, ask yourself, why could that be so important, especially that if you have all the other competencies. So if they have decided to invite you to an interview, I mean, that's already half the battle. But now it's important to understand why that particular aspect could be important for the potential employer. So as already mentioned, it could be use of language, corporate standards, knowing a reporting system, quality, processes, etc. So how do you then rephrase it, or how do you talk to the skeptic before they address it? I know I don't have experience in an international law firm, in an international consulting firm, or an international agency, but I've been working in English or German for 3 years. The majority of my clients, like Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and I don't know, Volvo, were international corporations with very demanding reporting rules as well as strict quality and compliance standards. So I'm giving alternative arguments I'm giving alternative arguments. Here, that happens more and more often. Experienced project manager with no project management certificate, have been invited to an interview, could address it up front. I saw that the prerequisite are Scrum and Agile certificates, which I don't have, and I have to say, not yet. Although I have been using both methodologies and practices in my own teams for the last 3 years, I understand that the confirmation of my theoretical knowledge is important. I already have signed up for the necessary exams. And you take out this potential no-go from a recruiter's perspective. Okay, 4th level, CWARBA. So strategic interviewing with active relationship building element. So we now went from basic bad interviewing, so ping-pong style, to basic good interviewing using STAR, to strategic interviewing, where you make sure that you mention the most important things to know about you within the first 20 minutes. And here we said having a good CV, good profile summary prepared is crucial. And now the last step, which is the absolute most difficult one, especially online, is with active relationship building elements. I hear all of you interviewing online and building rapport is difficult, but it is possible. So how do you do that? So it is the same as the strategic interviewing, plus what do we add here? You fully engage with the interviewer, you actively listen, you enrich the other sides, you share your energy, you build a connection, you build rapport. How to do that? Among others, tuning into the communication style. So let's look at the different communication styles. On the X, on the lower axis, we have low and high assertiveness, and on the Y, we have low responsiveness and high responsiveness. What does that mean? Low and high, let's start with responsiveness. Low and high responsiveness is more or less the amount of words I use and the amount of emotions I use when answering a question. To give you an example, Monday morning, or let's say after quarantine time, everybody or 50% is back in the office, and you ask somebody, so how was your home office? And they say, yeah, it was good. You ask somebody else, yeah, no, we figured it out. We came up with a system where my husband and I, my wife and I did something, and 2 sentences. And then you ask somebody else and they say, oh no, our home office in quarantine time, oh, let me tell you. So I had to figure out how to get my 2 kids and and 10 minutes later, you still don't know how to figure out home office for themselves. So low to high responsiveness is how much response, how many words, how much emotion are in the answers, how long are the answers, how long are the reactions. So this is low and high responsiveness. And low and high assertiveness is looking at the traditional assertiveness definition. How the own opinion, how much the own opinion is pushed, or how much I stick to certain limits. Okay, so now let's look at low assertiveness and low responsiveness. We call that communication style analytical. And low assertiveness and high responsiveness, we call that communication style amiable. I should say amiable. And high assertiveness and low responsiveness is driver, and high responsiveness and high assertiveness, the communication style is called expressive. So amiable, how do amiable people come across during interviews? Patient, sympathetic, mature, stable, considerate, team person, supportive, loyal, etc. Expressive come across as verbal, enthusiastic, impulsive, motivating, convincing, influential, confident, optimistic, charming, sometimes even dramatic. Analytical communication style, they're precise, they talk slower, they're disciplined, deliberate, I can't do that, cautious, diplomatic, systematic, logical, conventional. And when it comes to the driver, action and result-oriented, decisive, they're problem solvers, direct, demanding, assertive, competitive, independent. Now, you can hear the communication style of your interviewer usually within the first 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. Is how they formulate questions, how they formulate follow-up questions, are they high energy, low energy, etc. And you can engage with that. So you look at speed of speaking, way of behaving. Do they actually small talk? Do they wait for you to initiate? Do they ask a lot of questions? Do they create a friendly or challenging or accepting atmosphere? And here a tip, you can try to look at their LinkedIn profile and see, do they share information? How do they share it? How much activity is there? Expressive styles, there's more cheering and sharing. If it's more on the analytical side, you will see no activity or very data-driven, for example, communication. So tuning into the interviewer's style. So if somebody has an analytical interviewing style and you are on the expressive communication style, or driver and amiable, so those are the direct opposites that work like oil on fire, it doesn't work well together. So if you know, if you identify the right communication style, you're able to tune in with that and then maybe focus more on facts, or focus more on emotions, or focus more on energy, or focus more on results. Yeah, do they ask about details? So if there are follow-up questions on details, you know, it's a high likelihood that the person is more on the analytical side. Okay, I see that a couple of you were typing. I think you have questions or want to comment. If you do, please, yes, there is something coming up. Or not. Okay, so here are a couple of additional tips when interviewing with the specific players, headhunters, with the business side, and even with artificial intelligence. So when interviewing with headhunters, what's important to know is that no headhunter is bored. There's always a reason for an introduction meeting. Even if they say, I don't have projects currently, there's a high likelihood that they are currently working on something, or they don't want to share it with you because of confidentiality. And depending on how you present yourself during the first 20 minutes, you will find about their reasons or you won't. What's here now important, especially for executives. So if you are in a decision-making role, obviously you can be in a situation that you are invited to interviews just because they want to develop a relationship with you. They see in you a potential client and not a potential candidate. It is annoying, but use it to your advantage. And when talking to headhunters, make sure that no conversation with the recruiter is one-sided and that you always walk away with something beneficial. What could that be? You can ask for feedback on your profile. You have given the recruiter 20, 30 minutes of your time. Now it's time for them to share value with you as well. So you can ask them, well, how do you see my profile in context of today's market? What do you think about my salary expectations? How do you see the current market? What companies do you think are currently recruiting? What companies do you think could be interested in my profile? So use them as sources of information. You can ask about their other open recruitment processes and offer to recommend somebody from your network to them. Okay. I did say use them as a source of information, but I'd also have to don't believe everything you hear. What do I mean by that? This is only one opinion. One opinion does not stand, or one experience does not stand for the rest of the market. One example, I had a client, CEO, who sent out her CV, and a headhunter called that CEO, reprimanding them on the document because it looked differently. That CEO then called me and said, Sandra, we need to stop emailing all those companies because this headhunter just called me to tell me that the CV is crap, da 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 da. I did convince the client to not change anything in the format, and that person was then in 15 recruitment processes within 6 weeks. So again, it's just one impression. Then we had a client in the finance industry. She had 10 interviews with executive search consultants in the same city, operating in the same finance markets. And she said 1/3 told her, listen, you have a good profile, it's a good time to move. 1/3 of the interviews, they actually told her, be happy to have a job. And the other third was completely neutral, random conversations. Now imagine that you do not play the numbers, you don't contact 50 headhunters, but only 10. And out of those 10, you interview with 2 who tell you that you should be happy that you have a job. You don't get to experience the whole market. So be careful with taking feedback too literal, too black and white. Just use it as one more data point in your statistics. And if really more than 1/3 says something and they keep repeating a certain piece of advice, then maybe it's time to listen, but don't just believe one person. Okay. And here's some tips when interviewing with HR. So with HR, you have standard okay, maybe that's a good point, because this was with headhunters. Do you have any questions when it comes to interviewing with headhunters? About not interview questions and headhunters, but generally headhunters. Okay, here's a question. But this is not recruiting related. This will be in the Q&A that I'll remember in a bit. Okay, good. Then let's move on. I do see your question with the metaphor. So when interviewing with HR, again, you have standard predictable questions. There are literally no surprises. And they're gatekeepers. They need to make sure that you as a candidate don't waste a manager's time. That's it. It's important for them to understand the candidate's motivation. Motivation in terms of overall career. So why did you move from A to B? Was it a choice that you made? Was it a plan? Why? What motivated you? They want to verify the culture fit. And with competency-based, and they like and practice competency-based interviews, meaning they will ask a lot of questions. Give me examples of how you work in a team, of your leadership, how you solve a problem, how you made an important decision, how you communicated something difficult, how you did this, how you did that. Competency-based interviews. So if you know that this is going to happen, prepare for that. Their role is also to verify the truthfulness of the CV, because everybody lies, as Dr. House would say, or express the same thing differently. So for some candidates, when they see international experience, it could mean for some worked and lived in 9 countries, worked at an international company, or worked at a local company with international clients. And all these things could qualify as international experience. So this is about the truthfulness. This is to understand, how do they understand international? How do they understand restructuring? How do they understand digitalization, etc.? Okay. When interviewing with the business side, and there are a lot of mistakes, especially if you talk to the business side when you yourself contacted them through direct application. You need to make sure to communicate your potential added value. You need to make sure to know and communicate your unique selling proposition. They need to understand what problems you can solve for the business. And especially if you were the one proactively getting in touch with them, you need to understand, where do you fit in the organization? You need to have ideas and do the proper research up front. So this is almost like solution selling. If you're an outside consultant, to say, listen, I think I could fit in here, I could fix this, I could do that, etc. And as I already mentioned, it is a source of a lot of mistakes and a lot of lost opportunities, because you were the one getting in touch. So you should be the one saying, listen, I can do these various things, or manage the conversation differently, where somebody says, okay, well, please tell me about yourself, da, 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 da. And then you, as the outside person, you are a potential, let's say, consultant who says, okay, so how are your sales numbers doing currently, and what channels have you been using? So you can also proactively, in the organization with the business side, you can, in the conversation, identify potential areas where you could add value. Okay. And tips on pre-recorded interviews. So that's another example of technology being used. How does that work? Pre-recorded interviews, you log onto a platform. There are 10 questions pre-recorded, and you then record your answers. And there are 2 types of pre-recorded interviews. One where you get only one opportunity to record your answer, and the other one where you can record your answers as often as you want. And statistics show that the second option, candidates do better if they can adapt and adjust their answers and re-record them. What happens to the recording? Well, it depends on how the system is set up. A human listens to the recording and then assesses it and shares it maybe with the hiring manager. Or first, artificial intelligence assesses your answers and then recommends the candidate to a human for further processing. And one of the examples, one of the providers of pre-recorded interviews is HireView. And here in one of the interviews, they said we get about 25,000 data points from 15 minutes of video per candidate. So they interpret how truthful is that person when answering. Do they lie? Is there active deceit? Are they happy about something? Happy, get excited about certain questions, or not that excited, etc. And if there are providers and new challenges, there's usually also new solutions. One gentleman decided to prepare an interview trainer based on AI. Interview Trainer is an AI app that asks interview questions and provides feedback on how you may be perceived by your interviewer. From soft to hard skills, we've got it covered. #AceYourInterview. Is available right now only for Apple users, meaning iPhone. So it is an app, no web version here, and doesn't work yet for Android. Okay, further recommendations, and we're good in time. When looking at interviews and preparing for interviews, you can also look at it from a different perspective. So make sure to have arguments and reasons ready for why should you be on the long list, why should you even participate in the recruitment process, why should you be taken into consideration. So this is, we've had it in one of the previous modules. Why do you qualify overall as a candidate to be taken into consideration? And then challenge yourself further and say, why are you shortlist material? Why are you better than 500 other candidates? What is that unique thing about you? And make sure you have answers and reasons for both questions. And here, what's important to know, if you don't know the answers, that your interviewer won't know either. So you need to prepare that.
Hi, you have just watched a little fragment of all the know-how at Career Angels that goes into finding the best possible job. We have decided to put our know-how into one very thorough and structured course that is now available on Udemy. In that course, we will walk you through all 4 steps of the job hunting process. Step number 1 is about goal setting, realistic goal setting. We will explain career management theory backed by research, as well as walk you through the parameter bidding exercise. Step number 2 is about your unique selling proposition. In other words, how you position yourself on the current job market. Step number 3 is about communicating that in your CV for applicant tracking systems, and your optimized LinkedIn profile. Step number 4, the last step, is about managing and navigating the job hunting channels, meaning how to network, how to apply to job ads, how to contact headhunters, and how to contact and reach out to decision makers at the companies you would like to work for. So in summary, the course is very thorough, explains all our methodology, and is now available on Udemy. Summarizing, our course on Udemy walks you through the 4 steps of the job search process. Why did we decide to publish it? We did that so that your own job search becomes less frustrating, faster, and more effective. If you'd like to check it out, find the link down there in the description.